Good afternoon and welcome to Have You Thought of a Career in Medical Research? My name is Natalie Ford, and today we have three speakers waiting to talk to you about their careers and their work. So coming up soon, we have Helen Diverstein, Rand Al-Casey and James Edwards, and they'll all be telling us a little bit about their careers. We are now going to move on to our first speaker, who's going to tell us a little bit about what she's doing now and how she got to where she is. So our first speaker is Helen. Would you like to go ahead, Helen?
Thank you, Natalie. So I am currently working as a postdoctoral researcher and cryo-EM scientist here at Oxford. Now, a postdoctoral researcher is basically an academic researcher. I guess it's the stage before you become academic with your own group. And electron microscopy is an imaging technique that we use quite a lot in structural biology. And some of my research projects, most of my research projects are focused on virology. And probably the virus that you've heard of, that you're most likely to have heard of that I've been studying is a certain SARS-CoV-2, which I'm sure you're sick of hearing about in the news. So how did I get here? So I must admit, when I was at your stage, I knew that I wanted to get away from home and go to university, but I wasn't particularly sure what I wanted to do. While I was doing my GCSEs, I was dead set on doing medicine, and I went to pre-med experience, did work experience, all sorts of things, and then realized that really that medicine just wasn't really what I thought it would involve after these experiences, and panicked somewhat when it came to writing my UCAS form. Now, for my A-level selection, for my AS levels, I did history, biology, chemistry, maths, and psychology. So it's quite mixed for various reasons. Because of personal reasons, I ended up dropping down to 3 subjects in my for my A levels, and that was history, biology, chemistry. So it's still pretty broad. So in a panic, lots of people said that I was reasonable at history, so I was like, oh, I'll just apply for history. Sounds like a solid degree to have. Could go into law or something afterwards with a conversion. So I submitted my offers, submitted my UCAS, got my offers back, and realized after properly looking into what a history course involves that it really didn't suit what suit my interests, and that I just really miss science. So I ended up calling up all of the institutions I had offers from to see if I could switch to biochemistry. And my favorite university in the list, the University of York, said that their biochem course was full, but they had space on chemistry. Would I like to do that instead? So I had to, in 24 hours, submit a revised personal statement, have an interview with them, and I ended up on the chemistry course. And I must admit, I never regretted that. I actually thought it was way more interesting than what the biochemists were doing. Now, it was a slightly unusual, well, I think they're more common now, but it was an integrated master's. It had an integrated master's. So it was a 4-year course, and at the end, you get a master's degree in chemistry. And in that 4th master's year, you get to do some research in addition to teaching. And that was when I first got a feel for how fun actually research in academia is. Before, I just thought that there are just lots of dusty, eccentric people who have been sniffing chemicals for a bit too long. But actually, it turned out the field of academia was pretty cool. You have like loads of people at collaborations all over the globe, so lots of excuses, holidays, and really fun, varied days in the lab. So after speaking to a few people, I found that really, if you want to be a researcher and get into like a reasonably senior position, you really need to have a PhD. Now, a PhD is you become a doctor at the end, but not a useful one, I agree, as in not a medical one. It's a 4-year course, but really you kind of you work as a researcher, so kind of as a job, and it's almost like an apprenticeship. So the only exam you have is right at the end, and that's your thesis, so a book on all your research, and an oral exam called the Viva, which is actually just a fun discussion about your work with someone from the department and someone outside of the department, which is quite a nice ending. So anyway, I decided to do a PhD. However, again, I wasn't sure what subject I wanted to do my PhD in. I did, although I really loved chemistry, I did kind of sometimes feel a bit envious about of the biochemists, some of the interesting biology they're doing. So I basically applied for quite a variety of PhDs, ranging from pure chemistry to biochemistry to biology, more biology, computational biology. And the scheme I went for was quite a cool scheme, actually, that's provided by the Wellcome Trust. And it's an unusual type of PhD in that your first year you have a few lectures, none of it's assessed, but you have like a few lectures on the field, because it's kind of designed for people who are new to the field. And also you get to do 2 short research projects of your choice, so that you can kind of formulate your research idea for the rest of your PhD. And that's really cool as well, because you could get more of a feel for what might or might not work. So I ended up doing that. And if you want to know more about the PhD experience, do ask. But next thing, so when I finished my PhD, I decided to carry on doing some research in the department. Fortunately, they had some money available. Well, I decided what to do next, or where to go next. Unfortunately, this coincided with the beginning of the pandemic. So, well, I say unfortunately, maybe fortunately in my case, because I was able to join part of the research team here that's been looking at the structural perspective of SARS-CoV-2, and through that I was able to demonstrate my ability to run electron microscopes fairly competently and independently. And I was able to apply for the hybrid role that I started as of beginning of this year, which involves kind of half managing the facility and half doing research. That's kind of, in my opinion, best of both worlds. And just so you know, I keep referring to electron microscopes, but of course, I mean, certainly when I was at your stage, or even when I was beginning my PhD, I didn't know what an electron microscope looked like. They are basically massive and worth millions of pounds. They're not your kind of little dinky like microscope toy that you guys may be envisaging. And just to give you an idea of the size of the stuff that we look at, some of the bigger samples we have are viruses, which are less than a micron across. So there we can image very, very tiny things. So I think that's everything. So do feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you very much, Helen. Yeah, we've just had a question come in saying, how do you keep yourself motivated in your projects? Research seems to drag on and on. Can you share your personal experience?
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, I think the problem is a lot of people who go into research expect kind of to have results, positive results immediately, and want this kind of big shiny kind of groundbreaking piece of research. And in reality, in science, you're just contributing small tiles to a quite rich mosaic of research that loads of people contribute to. And that to me is kind of more special than, I don't know, just going off on your own and coming up with some genius discovery. And I guess, and negative results are sometimes interesting. Yes, it gets a bit miserable when you repeated the same assay for the 100th time and it's not working, but it's still a bit of a puzzle. And at that stage, well, hopefully earlier, you get to engage with colleagues and kind of bounce ideas off them and stuff. And that whole process is actually quite fun. I mean, yeah, it's frustrating that you're not getting the result you want, but actually the kind of discussion and idea generation and stuff, to me, is highly stimulating. I mean, life is never easy, right? And if anything, it would be boring if you just keep getting positive results. Having said that, I have had a week of positive results this week, so perhaps you've caught me on a good day. But yeah, I guess the secret is to just not expect to get that kind of Nobel Prize moment, which isn't a thing, to be honest.
Okay, I've got one more which is actually more specific to you, and one that's general, which I think I'll keep for everyone at the end. What was it that turned you away from pursuing medicine in the end? You said doing the experiences made you realise you weren't so keen on the idea. Was there anything particular?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I think, I don't know whether it's still the case these days, but like often if you're of a vaguely scientific bent and you're reasonable, you've got a reasonable academic record, you're kind of shoehorned into doing medicine. And it seems like at the time I was like, oh, I really like the idea of being able to help people, this is kind of most direct thing, etc. And I realized actually that the sort of thing I was after from medicine, you'd get if you did nursing. And I seriously considered actually switching to nursing on several occasions, including after I defended my thesis. But my slight problem is that I like to kind of be in more of a senior management position. And also I'm not like the best of people at kind of practical skills. And if it's in a lab and you accidentally spell a bit of cell culture medium, that's okay. But if it's a human, and that's kind of less okay. So I guess it's a combination of those things. I must admit, I was also put off by certain characters in the on the pre-med course I went on. They were quite confident, let's say. And that's not a good reason by any stretch of the imagination to be put off pursuing a career path. But for me, that really did affect my decision. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We will come back to you at the end. There are some more questions that have come in, but I'm just going to move to our next speaker, and I'll ask those questions probably to everyone at the end. So our next speaker is Rand Al-Casey, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about her work and her career. Rand.
Hi everyone, I'm Rand. So I'm originally from the Netherlands, so I won't be able to give you too much advice about how to do your GSCs and your A levels and all of that, but I'll just share my experience into how I got here. So I grew up in a very small town in the Netherlands and did all my schooling and my university there. And so the way it works for us is that you don't really pick your subjects like you do here. You kind of take all your subjects to your final exams. So I had a mix of everything, really. I had a mix of all the sciences, I had languages, I had classic subjects, and I was just interested in a lot of things, but I was primarily interested in the sciences and namely biology. And in my final 2 years, which corresponds to your sixth form here, I decided to look into medicine as a degree, just because I found that it encompassed a lot of my interests, from basic science to how that basic science results in, diseases and how to treat that, and kind of the whole thing. So in the Netherlands, when you apply for medicine, you apply to the course and not to the university. So I applied for the medical course and was lucky to get into the university that I wanted. So I did my medical degree at the University of Leiden, which is on the west coast, kind of between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. So in the west mid part of the Netherlands. Our course is 6 years, and the first 3 years are mainly theoretical, and you have your lectures, your seminars, and all your exams. And then the final 3 years are heavily clinically oriented. So you rotate between different departments and different specialities to get more of a hands-on experience of what individual parts of medicine look like. And within that, there's also a research component. So we have a 6-month research internship, and you can do that anywhere you want. You can do that in the hospital you study at, but you can also go abroad for that, or just a different hospital in a different setting, depending on where your interests are. So during my first 3 years, when we got all the theoretical knowledge, I was really interested in orthopedics. So the way you move your body and the way disorders of that type affect your mobility. So I contacted the lecturer that was giving most of our talks during that block of teaching. And I asked him if he had any connections abroad in orthopedics, because I really wanted to go abroad for my research internship, because it's pretty much one of the only times during our 6-year course that we get to go abroad. And the Netherlands is a very small country, so you want to have some experience abroad as well. And my lecturer knew the head of the department of orthopedics at Oxford, and contacted him for me and kind of got the ball rolling for me to come to Oxford to experience research and to experience, a different country, a different healthcare setting, all of that. So in my 4th year, I came to Oxford for my research internship, and I got working with a group that was looking at a combination of orthopedic disorders, but also very much involved in what kind of materials do we need to solve certain problems, like when you have tendons tearing off of bones, what do we do at the moment, and why is that not enough, and what can we do to improve that? So it was a very, very much a multidisciplinary kind of group. So we had everyone from basic scientists to engineers to medics in that group, and it was really fun to learn from different fields on how to tackle one certain problem. So I spent 6 months there, and I really, really enjoyed it. And especially because during my course, I found that we didn't get that much hands-on experience in research. We got a lot of training on how to properly read papers and how to distill information from papers and what to do with it and how it can be useful or why something is not useful, but not really much on how to conduct proper experiments or how to conduct research, or if you have a question, how do you go about answering that question? So it was a very eye-opening experience for me. And I just really enjoyed seeing the other side of medicine, as you will, the part, like everything that gets done before anything comes to a patient. So when I came back to the Netherlands to finish my course, I still had 2.5 years to go in my degree, but the research part really stuck with me, and I decided that I wanted to apply for a PhD to explore that further and to see if maybe medicine was not for me and maybe research fit me better. So when I graduated, or before I graduated, I applied for a PhD program with the same group that I did my internship at, and was very fortunate to get accepted and to work with the supervisor I wanted to work with, and kind of explore more of the project that I had done and explore more different angles of that particular project. So 3 days after I graduated medicine, I came to Oxford to start my PhD in 2018. And it was all going okay, like it was going fine. And then COVID obviously happened. So I got a bit sidetracked like a lot of people did. So I'm here for an extra year longer than I anticipated, which obviously is not the end of the world. But during my PhD, I'm in my final program now, I realized that as much as I really enjoyed research and as much as I enjoyed learning about a lot of different topics from a lot of different people outside of the medical field, and even outside of the biomedical field, I learned a lot of things from friends who were doing a law degree or a physics degree, or even an astrophysics degree, which is an experience I wouldn't have had if I had stuck with medicine and spent most of my time with just medics. I realized that I do really miss the part of medicine that attracted me to it in the first place, which is kind of just the interaction, the daily interactions you have with patients, but also your colleagues, and more of the teamwork that goes about, you have a team surrounding a patient, and that entire team just has one goal for that patient, is to fix whatever their problem is and to get them home ASAP. And I miss that, working as a team to solve one problem, which I found during my PhD. Well, obviously COVID didn't help with that, is that I found it a bit isolating, because I'm the main driver behind my project, obviously, because it's my project and it's my degree in the end. But I miss the working in a team aspect a lot, and the interacting with people, and just seeing a patient that comes into the hospital leave again because you fixed their problem. So after I complete my DPhil, I'm intending to go back into medicine and to start my clinical training. But I've never had regrets of pursuing this PhD. I think it was a very valuable experience for me. And I do intend to stay involved in academia, because I do really like academia. I just think I like medicine a little bit more. So yeah, that's really the the end of my story. And if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you, Rand. Rand, you what is your project that you're doing at the moment? You mentioned your first one was on tendons. Is your PhD also on tendons?
Yeah, so my PhD is also on tendons, and we're interested in looking at the tendon to bone attachment, namely the interface where the tendon goes into bone, because that's the weakest part of any attachment, really, is the dissimilarity in materials. And what we're looking at is creating alternative surgical implants to the ones that currently exist, to solve the problem of tendon tears off the bone. Because what currently happens is you insert your bone anchor, you reattach your tendon using sutures, and then that's the main premise of tendon repair, but it has quite a high failure rate, so it's not an effective method at all. And most of that is due to the fact that we don't use materials that are very conducive to wound healing. So you reattach your tendon mechanically, but it doesn't do much in terms of improving the biology of the injured tendon. So you end up with a tendon that's composed mainly of fibrotic tissue and not a very functional tendon. So what we're hoping to do is construct implants that have, more bioactive cues and that can aid tendon regeneration in a hopefully better way than current implants.
Okay, thank you very much, Rand. So we're now going to move on to our last speaker. So our next speaker is James Edwards, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how he got to where he is now. James.
Hi, everybody. Hi, my name's James, and I'm an associate professor here within NDORMS, which is the Nuffield Department of Orthopaedics, Rheumatology and Musculoskeletal Sciences at Oxford. Thanks to Natalie for setting all this up. We were asked to talk a little bit about ourselves and our background and our roots into academic research. So I've tried to cast my mind back many years to when I was in year 12 and thinking about what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it, where I wanted to go, what you want to do with your life. I think when I was in year 12, I probably wanted to be racing Formula One cars, and that had much to do with the area where I grew up. So I was born in rural Wales, and I grew up in rural Wales, and my family were largely mechanics, and we didn't really go to university. In fact, nobody in my family had been to university at that point. But during my sixth form, I was very interested in biology. Actually, that's not true. I wouldn't say I was very interested in biology. I was more interested in doing more enjoyable things than schoolwork. But it was clear that I was going to try and go to university. So I had to try and make a choice as to what I wanted to do. And I could have gone and done maths, and I could have gone and done engineering, maybe, which might have fitted with other things. But the thing I was most interested in was biology and English as well. But I think that was a bit of a close one. I figured biology would be a bit more interesting. So I didn't really have a good idea about what I wanted to do beyond that. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a scientist. I was just making short-term decisions based on my sort of immediate needs, wishes, and desires. So it wasn't against the wish of my family. They were very encouraging and supportive, which was good. But they didn't entirely understand why I would want to leave Wales, let alone cross the bridge and go to England. And similarly, they didn't understand later on in life when I wanted to leave the UK and move to the US, because I worked over there for many years. But I did, so I went and I did my first degree in Bristol, but I didn't really choose my degree course, as I said, based on any particular design for what I wanted to do with my life. I made these choices based on what I enjoyed doing, and I would encourage you guys to do the same. So I ended up doing a degree in biomedical science, which to me seemed like a very interesting version of biology. I didn't really want to do medicine. I never really wanted to do medicine. But biomedical science seemed like a halfway degree between biology and medicine. So this is what I did at Bristol. What I didn't realize at the time is that it kind of funnels you into doing hospital laboratory research. Hospital laboratory work. So you're really processing the samples that are taken during clinic, the blood samples, the pieces of tissue that get taken off you when you go to see a GP, or biopsies during visits to clinics and things like that. And that was okay. So when I graduated, I didn't do particularly well, and I was way too distracted with all the other things that a university experience offers to a naive child from the rural Wales. but I worked in hospital laboratories for about a year and a half then, thinking about what it was that I wanted to do. And then I took a gap and travelled for quite a while as well after that, and was lucky enough to end up back here doing working in a hospital laboratory and having the opportunity again to move sideways and do a DPhil. So it was around that time that I was given the opportunity to do a PhD and then move forward in doing this. So you've kind of already heard about what it is to do a PhD and the routes that sort of channels you into. You know, my research now is focused on aging and lifespan and longevity and how this leads to a dysregulation of the cells within the musculoskeletal system and osteoporosis and arthritis and these other aging related disorders. So that's what we study. But life as an academic researcher is largely spent with me sat here in this desk writing grants or writing papers, meeting with people and trying to build projects and trying to draw in money. It's very rarely as exciting as what you might have seen our vaccine colleagues talking about, or there's nobody applauding me at Wimbledon, but that's not to say that we don't do interesting work, or that they aren't deserving of it, of course. So sorry, that's a little bit of a whistle stop through my background, at least the early stages of it. I've left out the later stages, but I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, James. I don't think we have any specific questions for you now, but we have heard from all of you. So I'm just going to go through the more general ones. I'm actually going to start, James, just by asking you the question that we had for Helen, which was how do you keep yourself motivated with your projects?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that. I find it difficult to be motivated because it's nice to think about what you're doing for mankind and the good of science, but I feel as though I'm probably at a stage in my career now where things aren't as exciting as they used to be. You know, what I enjoy doing now is things like this, actually, Natalie, and you know, I run a program within the medical sciences division here for students from low socioeconomic and disadvantaged backgrounds to try and help them come to Oxford or to consider doing postgraduate education or consider doing these sorts of degrees. Because I find that quite worthwhile, especially in stuffy places like Oxford, where people don't always feel as though they're welcome or don't always feel that they belong. So that is good, and I really enjoyed having students in our group who we've been able to change their lives essentially and help them to on the path to a DPhil. You know, we've had people who have come from all parts of the world. We've had people who have come from India and Burma and Asia and Korea and the Middle East, and you know, they're now making lives for themselves, either in academic research or in industry research. You know, my first PhD student is now a collaborator of mine over in the US, and you know, she's now an assistant professor there as well. And it's nice to see these people coming through. So out of all of it, it's sort of the helping people that motivates me more, rather than the belief that anything that we do here will actually help anybody medically. Sorry, that's quite a negative answer.
No, it's perfectly fine to have other things that motivate you within your job. Rand, did you want to say anything about that? So what keeps you motivated?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer. I think it really depends on your ultimate goal. I think keeping your end goal in sight is a good motivator, because my end goal is obviously to finish, to graduate, and to go back into medicine. I think if you find that you're struggling to motivate with anything, just try to think, what is your long-term goal? And it's difficult if you have a long time to go, but you can find small goals in your weeks as well, in your months. Like this week, I just want to achieve this. This month, I want to achieve that. So for me, that is currently finishing everything to get to the Christmas holidays, which is a great motivation to get work done. Yeah, I think it depends on your situation.
Okay, thank you, Rand. So another just quick question for everyone. How often do you read academic articles to keep up with the latest research in your field? So I'll start with Rand, since you're on already.
I read academic articles every day, but it's usually because I have a question about something or I am unsure about something. So I'll look up articles to find the answer I'm looking for or to justify why I'm doing a certain experiment. So for me, it's on a daily basis.
Helen, how about you?
So, I mean, by read, I assume that you mean not the entire article. Twitter. So I do have journal alerts, and I always kind of sort through them each morning, along with Twitter. Twitter's pretty good as well, and just have a browse. But sometimes it's just a matter of looking at the abstracts that are around. Sometimes I look in more depth, depending on what I've got on that day. It's just a matter of, I mean, especially things have been quite different with the pandemic because people have been publishing like crazy, and it's very difficult to keep on top of things if you're a bit lazy with your literature searches. Having said that, I've got some colleagues who don't really read papers that often. They just rely on tweets and seem to be fairly on top of what's going on in the world. So yeah, it's not like you need to spend hours and hours and hours. Certainly when I was a PhD student, I read. I was a better student and read more publications. But yeah, now I'm a bit more practical.
Sorry, Helen, could you repeat the thing that you said that you looked at aside from Twitter? I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, so it's possible to set up journal alerts. So you just kind of give them keywords related to your research. You just get a summary email each day with a list of recently published publications from various journals. And that's actually been particularly useful for some of the foot and mouth disease work I've been doing, because they tend to publish in what we call lower impact journals, just because it's not a kind of sexy topic at the moment, and it's quite difficult sometimes to actually know about them really without the alerts.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. James, how about you?
Well, I find it hard to find the time to read, and I know that it's a very important part of what we do in keeping up with the literature. But reading, in fact, most supervisors, you think you probably find that they'll say this, that they don't find enough time to do reading. So I do very little. I do rely on alerts, as was mentioned, but what's useful when you get slightly further along is that we have postdocs and we have students who work in my group, and they're running the project. And what we always say, and what we always say to all the students in the division when I talk to them, is that it's their project, it's their ownership, and they're the real expert in these areas. So I'm fine with them sending me papers, and we expect them to know everything, not necessarily us. So I've become used to relying on my people and the people who work with us to help keep me well informed as well, and that's really nice.
Cheers, James. We have a question here saying that if you want to go into biomedical research, is it wholly necessary to have a PhD, particularly if you're trying to decide between a university and an apprenticeship? Helen.
Sorry, so if you want to go into academic research, is that the question?
Well, they've just said biomedical research, so I'm guessing not necessarily.
So when I was trying, after my undergrad degree, when I was trying to decide whether or not to commit to another 4 years, I did speak to quite a number of people in industry and in kind of small biotech companies as well. And yes, you can get jobs in industry without a PhD, but because there are so many PhD students now, you are pretty low down the pecking order when you start. So it kind of depends on what level of seniority you want, and also kind of what sort of research experience you're after. I mean, ultimately, I guess with any path you go down, the end point, so to speak, is management, realistically. So yeah, no research. And also, if you want to work in academia but you don't want to do a PhD, you can be a research assistant, but in such cases you don't have your own research project. You're kind of lab minion. And actually some people do that for a bit and then decide to do a PhD. I've got a lot of friends who did that and said that it was a really good decision. And prepared them for what to expect.
Okay, thank you. Rand, did you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I think Helen covered most of the question. I think it depends on, again, what you intend to do. But if you don't have a clear idea of what you want to do, I don't think there's anything wrong with either option, because you can always switch back and forth. It's not the end all or be all. So I would say whatever you think motivates you more to do, just do that.
Yeah, I think there are more options now when you're doing apprenticeships to potentially convert those to degrees later. Or I know people who've been lab technicians, so I imagine if you go into being a lab technician from being an apprentice, then there's options then to go into PhDs if you're particularly skilled at lab-based techniques. I'm not sure what the rules are, but there are enough people who've done these talks now that I've seen many people who've started on one path and managed successfully to sort of move into another, sort of slightly sideways into another path as well. So I wouldn't rule it out. It seems to be a relatively straightforward way is to do a PhD, but I don't think it's definitely not the only route. Okay, so I think this might have been aimed at you, Helen. Do you usually do multiple research projects simultaneously? Is that normal for a biomedical researcher or a medical researcher?
No, well, the number of different plates I've got spinning is very unusual. I guess I was kind of both lucky and unlucky in that my PhD project was perhaps a little bit too ambitious, especially for my skill set, because remember I was new to the field, and I ended up just setting up ended up in lots of collaborative projects. I mean, I still sort of had my own research interests, but it was kind of ended up with all sorts. And because I stayed in the same place for my postdoc, I was able to continue with those and also develop new collaborations. And also because, as I say, I'm only half postdoctoral researcher, my EM support scientist role actually involves helping everyone in the department and any external users for our microscopes, helping them with their projects and training them. So yeah, the number of plates I've got spinning, I guess, is unusual, but generally speaking, people have more than one because, I mean, science inherently doesn't work and it's risky just putting all your eggs in one basket. And actually, the collaborative nature of science is super important, and it's important to develop that skill. So certainly here it's encouraged to have several different things.
Okay, Rand, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No.
Okay, here's an interesting one. I'll start with you, Rand, just because you're the last person to talk. Have any of you ever struggled academically, and what study tips do you have?
If you mean in school, then definitely. I would be surprised to know anyone who hasn't struggled academically, especially in comparing myself to others and comparing my grades to other people's grades and things like that. And the main thing I would say is, if you do struggle academically, don't struggle by yourself. Get help. And get help doesn't mean get professional help or, you know, go to a psychologist or anything like that. Just talk about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your teachers, talk to your parents, but don't dwell on it by yourself, because in most cases, you'll make it bigger in your head than it actually is. So if you find yourself struggling in school or university or anything like that, just ponder on it, because everyone goes through it. And there's not a single person that doesn't struggle in any aspect, academically or personally. So please talk about it.
Okay. Helen, do you have any tips or thoughts on that?
I mean, something that I think James said earlier was that, I mean, your degree, so during my degree, I was slightly overwhelmed in that, like, I came from a school where it wasn't the best of schools, and I was used to being reasonably high up in class, and then suddenly you go to university and there are people, especially people from maybe more independent schools, who are streets ahead of you, and it can seem quite daunting at first, but then I think you rapidly come to realize that, I mean, you start to learn your own limits, and like doing a university degree is kind of a learning process in life as well as academia. So yeah, there were periods where I kind of struggled, but we just like formed study groups to try and motivate each other, and also I learned how to create more of a balance and explore new things, because I mean, yeah, you need grades to get jobs and stuff, but that's not all of life. So if you're struggling, don't kill yourself to try and stay at the top. Just kind of assess where you are and make sure that you have an enriching experience rather than just trying to get the next shiny trophy or certificate.
Okay, that leads me nicely into another question we've had actually, which is, do you have a good social and academic life balance?
Not when I was a PhD student, I will say that. And that was probably one of my main regrets as a PhD student. I did get involved in some activities, but like especially towards the end, you kind of end up in a bit of you feel guilty, and you work yourself to the ground, and then you realize that that's super counterproductive. So yeah, that's something that I've been fixing as a postdoc. And yeah, I have reasonable balance of interest now. But again, like, it's all a learning experience, and you just need to kind of, I guess, understand your own limits.
Okay.
And what you want.
Rand, how about you? You're doing a PhD right now. Have you managed to find some time for social activities?
Yeah, I can completely relate to what Helen is saying, because I'm in my final months now as well. So I'm finding it difficult to have a life outside of work, but I do try to stick to like no more work after 6 p.m. and try to keep my weekends as free as possible, because it is counterproductive. If you just work all hours, you're not going to get anything done. I think the best tip I heard was reducing hours does not reduce work. So just try to force yourself to stop working and to enjoy free time and not feel guilty about it.
Okay, thank you, Rand. A couple of people have asked if you can share the schedule for a typical day at work, and someone asking sort of in conjunction, do you work in teams or is it more independent? So if we go with you again, Rand, and then we'll go back to Helen.
Yeah, so my typical workday kind of depends on my experiment. So usually I have a few experiments to get done in the week. So I'll go into the lab early in the morning and set up my experiment. I find that I'm most productive in the morning. So I try to get all the heavy thinking stuff done in the morning. So in the afternoons, I do like tasks like administration or like, you know, cleaning down my experiments, things like that. So my afternoons are always a bit more relaxed than my mornings. So I try to get in as early as I can, just to get in because from 8 to 12 is my most productive hours, and the rest of the day I'm not that great in producing, as you will. So yeah, 8 to 12 I work the hardest, and then have a lunch break, usually half an hour, and then in the afternoon do everything that I didn't manage to get done in the morning, or prepare things for the next day, and usually have a coffee break around 3, and then try not to work after 6 p.m. And then I usually go home, cook myself some dinner, watch Netflix, and go to sleep.
Yeah, well, I guess COVID has also rather limited some of the things, certainly earlier in the year. Helen, how about you? What's a sort of typical day look like for you?
That's really hard to say. So my schedule is kind of, there are certain things in my schedule that are locked in. So I have to do quite a few video calls, well, since pandemic. Previously it was meetings, and that's to do various things like running facility, catching up with some of my students, or the project planning with collaborators, or the spike team, Corona spike team here. So they kind of lock the hours of my day and what I can do in a day in place. But I'm also beholden on to when a new user needs training, so I have to work around their schedule. And then and I normally on a per weekly basis kind of have a timetable with these kind of fixed points in mind. And then in between that, I try and plan my own experiments. A lot of what I do at the moment involves a lot of data processing. So that's quite good because I can sometimes multitask during some calls. So sometimes I'll have 3 or 4 hours of teleconferences, during which time I'm also doing data processing, catching up on literature. And then I'll maybe do some lab work, prepare some samples. And then I often have admin work to do, like writing protocols for people or updating the website and stuff. So yeah, it's quite variable. And pre-pandemic, I had a lot of visits to other departments, like the Diamond Light Source, the synchrotron over in Harrow and stuff. Yeah, it's quite, each day is very varied. And then in the evenings, I normally have something on, whether it be, I mean, sometimes I go to a folk band that I'm part of, sometimes I'm just meeting up with friends, and well, obviously restricted at the moment. And sometimes like craft Zooms are quite a big thing. So normally have something on. Or I just read my book.
Fair enough. Excellent. We are running out of time, I think. Thank you very much to all our speakers, to Helen, Rand, and to James. Thank you very much for coming along and asking questions. We had loads of questions today, more than we could actually have time to answer. That's the end of the talk. Thank you all for coming.